All right, everybody, we are live. How are you tonight, guys? Welcome to Environmental Coffee House, everyone. Who we have people watching, which is great. I just want to explain something tonight. I am the person, obviously, that runs the show, and we are experiencing a storm where I am. And I don't know if you can see two Jennifers or one Jennifer or two Antonios or what, because something goofy is happening. And I see two, okay, I've got to fix it again. I see two Nicks and no Jennifer. So I've got to fix this and add Jennifer
I am
and not have
here. I
two
promise I'm
Nicholases,
here.
which
Oh, this is very odd.
okay,
I see two Nicks
yep,
as
I just
well.
fixed it.
Yeah.
Well, welcome
Oh, look at this.
everybody.
Now we have two Nicks, one Jennifer, one Nick,
I
one
know.
Antonio, one Sandy.
Yeah, I
Okay.
know. But I've got it. I got it fixed now. But and Kim says it's hard to hear. I really don't know what to tell you guys. I am in an electrical storm. And again, I'm running the show. I'm trying to make it louder and fix it. So we'll just have to wing it. Uh, we have a really good show. And if there happens to be any problems, I'm sorry. Hopefully, it won't go south if he's here. Hi, go south. Okay, and uh, Jennifer. We've got Jennifer, Nick, and Antonio. And tonight, I'm pretty much going to give the ball rolling to Jen while people and Kim says she can't hear me. Can you guys hear me?
Oh,
She can't, but other people can.
I can hear you
Yeah, I can
fine.
hear you.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
I don't know, Kim. I'm waiting to see what everybody says. I'm sorry, guys. Eventually, we're going to have some remediation to this in the form of a signal booster off my house, which is going to be like the old fashioned CB antenna hanging off there to pick up some Wi Fi from some mountain bouncing off. But anyway, anyway, Jennifer, Nick, Tony,
Yeah.
welcome. This is State of the Planet. And before I give it to you, Antonio, would you please repeat what you said earlier? Because I have it up on the screen.
The future has been such a letdown.
Yeah, we really like that one.
Very true.
Okay, I'm adjusting sound. I'm adjusting things as we go. Jennifer, why don't you take it away and
Yeah.
let everybody know what we've got going tonight?
Yeah. So, as we all know, as in the Arctic and as in Siberia, especially in this drill down, so goes the world. So, we're going to basically cover some territory in the Arctic. Our first article is going to be from The Guardian, and it's called Climate Change Made Siberian Heat Wave 600 Times More Likely. So, we're going to dive into that. Next thing we're going to dive into is something from World Weather
Hmm.
Attribution.org, and this is a deep dive into Siberia. Siberian heat wave of 2020, almost impossible without climate change. So this is basically an analysis of the footprint of humanity and the effect that we are having so far on the world. And then we're going to take a look at something from the Barents Observer, and it's also in Siberia. And this is kind of following up on that diesel spill in Norilsk. Another thing has happened up in Siberia. So this article's called "A Month After Environmental Disaster Comes Another Major Oil Spill on Taimyr Tundra." So this is what's happening. Heat plus tundra, permafrost equals permamush, and that is what is happening. Then we've got something from the Smithsonian, and it's called "Earth Could Hit Critical Climate Threshold in Next 5 Years." Pretty grim stuff. Then we're going to be diving into adventureblog.net, and we're going to talk a little bit about why elephants are dying in Botswana.
Mm.
And then if we have time, because we all hate him so much, President Trump rolls back environmental regulations to speed up big projects and the apocalypse. No, that last part was mine. So, but it wasn't that far off, right?
No, it's not.
So we're going to start off with this thing from The Guardian, and look, I think that probably Antonio and Nick and I are going to tag team a little bit. But basically, the point of this is climate change made Siberian heat waves 600 times more likely. And this is about the fingerprints of climate change and the record-breaking heat wave in the Siberian Arctic. So we've been focusing on Siberia a lot this year so far in Environmental Coffee House. And that's because Siberia is so abnormal. And it's more than 5 degrees above average overall, which is huge. So the Arctic, and Siberia mostly is inside the Arctic Circle, is heating 2 to 4 times faster than the rest of the Earth. And it's just incredible what's happening up there. So what is seen in this article is the Siberian heat would happen once in every 80,000 years without human interference. So in other words, the odds of this happening and it being 100 degrees in Siberia, 38 degrees Celsius, is like impossible. It is impossible for it to happen. And it should really kind of like alarm everybody incredibly. And scientists are saying that the human fingerprint has rarely ever been clearer. One guy says this is the largest signal we have seen. That's the guy who's the acting director of Oxford's Environmental Change Institute. And they also say that this study shows again how much a game changer climate change is with respect to heat waves. They then do a little bit of hopium. The need for stronger resilience was evident when melting permafrost and poorly maintained equipment led one of Russia's worst oil spills from a power station in Norilsk. And we've been talking about that, Sandy, and I've had a couple of shows about Norilsk and that big diesel spill up there. So the other thing that's very, very concerning is that concerns are growing high that the worsening positive feedback loops by melting heat reflecting ice and increasing the range and intensity of wildfires in Siberia. So I don't know if everybody knows, but Siberia is on fire. It just is amazing. There are Siberian blazes that have released 59 megatons of carbon dioxide in June alone. That's the highest amount on record. They're called zombie fires. And the melting of the tundra also increases the risks of a release of methane. As we all know, it's a highly potent greenhouse gas and will just add a lot more heat to the system because it immediately converts into heat. When the sun hits it, it heats up fast. So, not good news, I'm afraid, but we all knew that. The Arctic is warming faster than anywhere on the planet. And Australia has had unprecedented bushfires, as we know. And the Arctic and Antarctica has been registering exceptionally high temperatures. So, it's pretty darn tough. And then on top of it, we've got COVID attacking us.
Yeah, lovely.
Yeah.
Which some of us know about firsthand, right, Antonio?
Oh, yes. The victim myself.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. We're going to talk about that when we towards the end, um, when you
Yeah.
go over what's going on with that. Um, so, do we want to segue
I
then?
I wouldn't mind. I can go over some of the main findings from that World Weather Attribution Study.
That would be great.
I hadn't had a lot of time today to look over it because when I first read the story about it, it was quite shocking, just how strong the fingerprint was for climate change. Because usually it's it's 30% more likely, 60% more likely, 600 times more likely is pretty pretty loud signal. And I'm reading the worldweatherattribution.org's page for the Siberian heat wave, and it indicates the results showed with high confidence that the January to June 2020 prolonged heat was made at least 600 times more likely as a result of human-induced climate change. And the interesting thing about this is that even with climate change, as you mentioned, Jennifer, the prolonged heat was still a very rare event, expected to occur only once every 130 years. So it's quite devastating what's happening up there because you have this incredible heat. It melts the permafrost. It causes buildings infrastructure to collapse. It led to that huge spill of oil and fuel in Siberia, and it's only going to get worse. I mean, you're going to have more of these kind of extreme events in the next, in the coming decade and beyond that are going to be absolutely devastating, not only to wildlife, to human habitation, but to the environment in general because of everything humans have built on there that can no longer stand up to the collapse of the soil. The soil is supposed to be frozen, and it's not anymore.
Well, Nick, I wanted to ask you a question about, attribution science. It seems interesting to me when we talk about attribution science because it's still, I guess, one of my critiques is this idea of chasing a signal when the entire system itself has changed. I think it's been clear, at least since 2016, we've been seeing events in the Arctic that are registering around 100 degrees Fahrenheit year after year. So
Yeah,
it's not just that we're looking at this isolated event and then what attribution science does is because it looks at individual events and then through a type of arithmetic calculate how much you can attribute that one event to the ongoing climate crisis. But in
right.
doing so, do we get a little bit away from understanding that, or I guess, well, maybe the science focuses on this, but it's given every single year. It's like the chances of a dramatic event start over every single year, but I don't know. We're getting these events so often. Is the science really saying anything about what does that mean to have these 100-year events happening,
Yeah.
2 or 3 years apart?
I mean, part of the reason for the attribution science is to more explicitly answer the question: did this event have anything to do with climate change? Because that's what a lot of people ask, and frankly, the only way people can really connect to climate change is to connect to the individual weather events that they experience on a day-to-day basis. Because sometimes people either don't attribute absolutely anything to climate change or they attribute too much. And so the science is trying to sort of answer the question, okay, did this event actually, because there's still, even with the world that's warmed 1.2, 1.3 C above pre-industrial, there's still a lot of overlap between the climate that we have now and the climate that we used to have. So you can have events that occur that are kind of in the middle, in the gray area in between the two, sort of like a Venn diagram. They cross paths, they cross each other. And so did this event really exceed, what we would have experienced in the normal climate, and really going into in a climate that's drastically, that we know has changed from the past? and so that's where the attribution science tries to come in and answer that question. But I mean, it's true. I mean, we're getting more events that, even if they're not as ridiculously extreme as what we've had now, they're still happening every single year. I mean, you see the fingerprints of climate change every year, that the sea ice slowly diminishes every single year, in extent and volume and thickness. I mean, and the sea level is rising. That's a fingerprint of climate change that's occurring continuously every single year, every single day. The sea level is rising on the planet, and so the weather it can be confusing, because it varies so dramatically day to day. A lot of meteorologists like to say normal isn't necessarily normal, meaning we don't get normal days that often. We get the highs, we get the lows, we get these heavy rain events, dry periods. So statistically, they're trying to identify a little bit better. Okay, did this event actually mean something in terms of climate change? Was it made more likely or less likely because of this shift? I mean, eventually, when you start talking about 2 degrees, 3 degrees, 4 degrees, your shift's going to be so extreme, you won't have to do attribution science anymore, because every event will be well beyond how it used to be in the past, in the old climate, the stable climate that we used to have. But we're still shifting, we're still phase shifting out of the old climate into this alien world, which, who knows how far we're going to go with that. Depends on the feedback loops. It depends on how much humans pump carbon into the atmosphere. We'll see how that goes, because I'm sure we're going to be experiencing it much sooner than later.
It's heavy. I'm just, wow. Jen?
Yeah, it's really amazing how everything is picking up so much speed, and what we're seeing is the whole thing sort of fall apart, and then we see the physical manifestations throughout Siberia. We've been talking a long time about the permafrost and the implications of permafrost melt just on infrastructure alone. And now we're starting to see that is actually happening. And we're seeing, we saw that big diesel spill up in Norilsk. Now we've got another disaster right on the permafrost. A month after the environmental disaster of Norilsk comes another major oil spill on Taimyr tundra. 45 tons of jet fuel leaks into the ground from a pipeline owned and operated by Nornickel. And if you guys remember, it was Nornickel that was implicated in that diesel spill up at Norilsk as well. So Nornickel's got their hands full, I would say, right now.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. So, this was a pipeline that ruptured. And this is the village located near Bolshaya Keta. Oh boy, my Russian pronunciation stinks. Which is a side river to the Great Yenisei, and that is a big river that flows, of course, into the Arctic.
Yep.
So, it's damn scary. It's, there's no words really for it, because I mean, not only are the greenhouse gases just going to be all oozing out of this rotting permafrost, now permamush, with the land all subsiding. Now, I mean, how many pipelines are there up in the Arctic Circle?
Oh, it's crazy.
Yeah.
I mean, that's,
if you think about it, a lot of the extreme weather. So, trying to put the attribution science and looking at the implications. So you're getting these extreme weather events, these extreme warming events. and they're literally having the impact of warping the land. And as the land is being warped, it's just venting immense amounts of emission into the atmosphere. But, you know, think about this. So when we look at these individual events, essentially what we're saying is this particular event that happened, let's say for this, you know, from June 6th to June 15th, that one particular heat wave event, and I don't know if that was the date, but I'm just assuming, you know, just saying hypothetically this one event. Scientists are looking at that and saying that one event had a 1 and 130 year chance of happening. Okay. But that's that one event. There are going to be multiple different events throughout that summer or this summer that are going to be 1 in 80 years or 1 in 50 years or 1 in 100 years. You see, and these different events are going to have that ability. I mean, just think about the ground. Think about a trampoline. Your body is the heat wave that's hitting the trampoline, and the ground is the permafrost that's responding to the heat. That's essentially what's happening. And these 50-year events happening 1 week, 100-year events happening another week, and this happening year after year every summer, we're hitting these events that are registering truly astronomically. Only if there was a global warming happening in the background is having the very real impact on our infrastructure.
You're basically talking a cumulative damage, a cumulative impact, a cumulative damage over time. You know,
right, because the ground is not being repaired. I mean, the permafrost isn't going back to its original state year after year. It's in a more weakened and weakened state, getting bigger and bigger blows.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean that's an issue with climate change all around the world. I mean, if you're talking about prolonged heat waves and droughts, prolonged damaging rain events, heavy rain events, rapid swings between periods of very heavy rain and drought and heat, and of course the Arctic just prolonged massive heat waves and drought every single year, fires every year. It's just a cumulative damage that adds up. And it's damage, of course, to infrastructure, to human habitation, to ecosystems. It's really it's really the most important aspect of climate change is the accumulative damage that just occurs every single year, every single moment, continuously, because it never stops. It just never stops. It never lets up. It never stops changing and shifting to more extreme, to more extreme conditions.
Yeah, it's irrevocable, and it's this march that we're seeing and we're witnessing, and it is so huge. And I every so often I talk to people like more in the business world and stuff who are kind of like starting to wake up, but they haven't gone full understanding kind of like what we're investigating. And they, you know, I work at a high tech company, and they're like, oh, well, you know, technology can fix this. You know, we can invent something. We've gotten out of everything before. We can do something about this. And they say this with full confidence, utter full confidence. And it's like, wow, that is just part of the stage of this. And that's kind of like
that's what denial.
It's denial, and it's kind of a little bargaining too. You know, it's kind of like, we're kind of smart enough, and let's see what we can do here. And they're not really grokking the magnitude of this thing. I mean, this is a freaking planetary, ecological, biosphere, disaster, meltdown, abrupt climate change, fucktopolis.
Well,
There you go.
okay, and we can put that the future has been such a letdown again. Aren't we just a bowl of cherries tonight? Well, everybody knows when they come to Environmental Coffee House, you're going to get a dose of reality. And we
Yeah.
also give you some we've also given you support and links to go where to go for that for support, like Carolyn Baker and others. Okay.
I
And
mean, it
Yeah.
and
really is a gruesome image, but this is what it looks like. Again, emphasizing the Earth is 1.2 degrees Celsius warmer. That's a sort of energy imbalance. And what happens when the Earth is taking on this extra energy, it kind of wildly spins around the ocean and atmospheric systems, and it manifests itself in these abrupt forms, in these very um, vicious forms, in heat domes or in super hurricanes, or and what's we as land creatures always talk about the heat domes on land, but there are also heat domes that are happening in the ocean as well. And they're eviscerating life forms and ecosystems in the ocean as well. So these impacts, particularly on the coast of this eastern Siberian Arctic shelf, which is what we've had great concern about in the Arctic because of the amount of methane that's going to be released. But I think we're setting ourselves up for kind of a classic reenactment of when the Siberian traps released their methane into the atmosphere. I mean, literally, we're seeing huge swaths of the ground. Just that's why I could only describe it as a type of liquefaction or trampoline, like happening, and it's you can't to imagine the ground to move so much and so violently. You know, these Russian outlets and towns and Alaskan towns as well that built these infrastructures, they've been here for hundreds of years. I mean, these people know how to, this is not incompetence. These people know how to live on the land, but the land is so violently changing in response to the atmosphere above it that it's really becoming completely unsuitable for human settlement.
yeah.
Yeah, that's right. And those pictures of the thawed permafrost are so scary. I mean, we're not just talking about the land getting kind of mushy. The whole thing is just falling away. It's subsiding. It's like a black slick that just is growing by leaps and bounds and turning into lakes and just, bubbling up. I mean, it looks like freaking, I don't know what. It's nasty. I bet it stinks too. Don't you think it would stink?
Yeah.
Yeah, there's
Yeah.
definitely a lot of rot between the grasses, the animals, the leaves, all the ancient vegetation.
Yeah, it's going to be full of mosquitoes too. It sounds like a nasty place to live right now, doesn't it?
And think about that. A lot of people have this idea that as, the mid-latitudes where we live warm up, that we're just going to hightail it up north.
Oh yeah. Another form of denial. Just like, I'm fucked in the head and I'm not going to examine this. I'm just going to say this outrageously, blow holes in that one, brother.
Yeah, I'm already as north as I'm ever going to get.
Jesus.
And we're having weather like
Yeah.
Florida.
Oh,
Yeah.
God. You're having some sort of tropical deluge that caused you to lose your wedding band in a
Oh yeah,
deluge. I mean, that's kind of
that
freaking
was.
karmic right
I
there.
haven't found it yet because I can't, the metal detector won't find it because it's so thick where I think it flew off in the bushes. It's all full of prickers, and I'm not going to cut that habitat down. I'll wait till the fall. It's not like I go anywhere,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's an
Yeah.
aside. We got a good crowd in the chat too. And don't forget, guys, we're going to take questions at the end, so save them up so I don't have to go through the whole chat and look for them. So where do you want to go next, Jen?
Well, I was thinking we could do this one from the Smithsonian Magazine. The name of this article is Earth Could Hit Critical Climate Threshold in Next 5 Years.
All right.
So they say that there's a 20% chance that one of the next 5 years will see annual global temperatures rise to 2.7 degrees Fahrenheit above pre-industrial levels. Well, I'd kind of like to turn this one over to Antonio to have his way with it and see what he thought about this, and also to talk about this fire up in Siberia and what's the danger of that.
Well, so I think it's really important that people understand that, I guess for our audience, we're well aware that the timeline on when we'll be getting these catastrophic temperature thresholds has been changing sporadically. And not only are the temperature thresholds changing for the time dimension when they'll arrive, but also what it means in terms of actually reaching them, the actual impacts of each of those degrees Celsius on a global average, and what that means for our regional communities. And to think about the idea that we're going to be passing through 1.5 degrees Celsius within the next 5 years just shows that we're really on an accelerated trend line. Previously, in the 20th century, the global average temperature was only increasing about 0.2 degrees Celsius a decade, between 0.1 and 0.2 degrees Celsius a decade. And now we see that the global average that we are going through an accelerated phase. I think all the first 2 quarters of this year have all registered, or every month this year, or close to every month this year, have registered above 1.2. And I think January, February, March, and April all 1.5 degrees Celsius. So we're already experiencing accelerated warming. But what's even worse, the thing about that is the 1.5 degrees Celsius that we might reach in the coming years here, that's global average. But for land averages, temperatures are going to be that's close to 2 degrees. And that's, global average land temperatures. And the different impacts that's going to have on different regions. I'm watching right now. I mean, the North Carolina that I'm growing up in right now is completely alien. This is a much warmer North Carolina than I grew up in. The average daily high temperature, I mean, we just spend most of the summer in the low to mid 90s every day. It used to be 10 degrees or 5 degrees Celsius warmer on average in the summer. I remember growing up, 90 would be, a very hot day. But now it's just like 90, 95 all the time. And this is dynamically changing the relationship the land has with the water cycle. And that dynamically changes the relationships that animals have with the land as well.
Do you hear that?
It's Nick. He has to mute himself. He's got traffic feeding back. Hey, Nick.
Me? That's
Nick.
Not me.
Yeah.
Can you mute yourself while you're not talking, if you don't mind?
Sure.
Thanks.
Sure.
I knew it was something I couldn't control. Okay, go ahead.
Okay. So yeah, it's just, understanding that, here on out, we're going to be on an accelerated trend line. One of the things I will say, just kind of emphasizing on this trend line, is that the SIMP6 models, that's the Intercomparison Project analysis, multiple countries that take part in it, the European Union, the United States, Japan, others, come together and develop these very detailed models that try to predict, what's the potential outcome of, our current trajectory. And they're really taking seriously these high-end scenarios, 5 to 7 degrees Celsius at the end of the century, and seeing something like 3 to 4 degrees by the middle of the century. So we are going to be on an accelerated pathway. And as we are going through this accelerated pathway, we're going to see some regions really, really take off. Evidence in the paleo record coming from Jim White at the University of Colorado explains that North America and Greenland have histories of increasing by 5 to 10 degrees Celsius within a college career. So we'll likely see those type of dynamic changes occur in North America, in Greenland, and probably as we are seeing the ripple-on effects of that happening in parts of the Siberian Arctic.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely stunning how quickly things are changing. And I personally feel that we're very much, in liftoff mode with abrupt climate change. And I think that, we've got so much with our society, just kind of pushing this system faster and faster. And Antonio, what you said about the Permian mass extinction and how our sudden burst of carbon into the atmosphere is analogous to the Siberian traps. I absolutely agree. The only thing I would say is that our release of carbon in the last 200 years and accelerating every year is 200 years, right? It's not, the 80,000 years or whatever. I mean, the Siberian mass extinction was deep, and it was the biggest one the Earth has ever gone through 250,000 years ago. But this is actually much more sudden, and the effects are going to be that much more notable. So we're going to see some action here, and we're just getting started. I mean, things are getting interesting, and we always say on this show lately, fasten your seatbelt. It's going to be a bumpy ride, and it is.
Sure feels like that. But even though, and I'm here to be Sally Sunshine, we're still here today. And
we're here today.
And I
That's
know
right.
It's harder. We have a span of generations right here. And I know it's more difficult for Nick and Antonio because they have a lot longer to see what's going to happen than me and you, Jen. I mean, it really, and
I know.
it's a tough thing. I feel that way too about my daughter. I'm the mama bear here, I guess. But and then we segue because we go to the elephants in Botswana, a completely different part of the world. And I want to comment on this one, and then I want to throw it out to you guys. I had done, and everybody knew I did. And by the way, really quickly, I want to show you guys, just in case something happens. I don't know if you can see it, probably not. What's over, it's the color, but what's over me is a gigantic thunderstorm and horrible rain. So let's all hope that nothing happens to my internet or power because I man the controls here. All right. So anyway, I'm going to do this. It's not a fun story. It's a horrible story, and it's for me. It's the picture is incredibly awfully disgusting and depressing, and I cry over these kinds of things, but it's happening and we can't close our eyes. But there have been other elephant die-offs, but this might be a little different. We were talking about this happening in Botswana, and they saw all these, they thought it was maybe up to 350, we don't know. They're having research and investigation, but these are the factors which I didn't know when I did my piece on this because this didn't happen. They said that the preliminary thought on what is happening to the elephants is the die off. A few options. Now, the ingestion of toxic bacteria in the water or anthrax poisoning, which could be natural, a natural occurrence, but why? Poisoning by humans, which was kind of ruled out mostly, but they're still having to have that in. Viral infection from rodents or pathogenic microbe. Now, what I wanted, they talk about the samples that they got from the carcasses. It was a relatively small area. But what I would like to do with that is throw this to Nick first, and because we did our show the other night, Tuesday night, and we briefly mentioned this, and now we have these concrete theories about what could have happened. And I would like you to speak on the drought and then the heavy rain. And
Yeah. I know we talked about it at Tuesday night, but I think there was some theories that you could have had a prolonged drought, then periods of heavy rain, and then that ends up creating, growing bacteria or fungus or something that could have poisoned the water supply and could have potentially killed the elephants. Obviously, just speaking in general, climate change is making certain parts of South Africa and East Africa much more prone to severe drought, and then you get periods of torrential rains that can come either from somewhat normal but altered weather patterns, or from cyclones as well, that just create these huge extremes. So it's going to be interesting for them to figure out exactly what happened, because it's kind of a mystery to me. I was speculating that it could have been something to do with maybe an extreme heat event or something, but it doesn't sound like that was the case. But there was a prolonged drought in the area, it sounds like, and a switch over to very heavy rain when this occurred.
Well, then we have a comment that's, well, actually, Vegematic said poisoned by farmers, but we don't know. Like you said, we don't know.
That's a possibility too. That's happened in India, I think. I think they've had an issue in India where animals have been poisoned. Elephants have been poisoned.
Well, if that's the case, the thing about that is, if that's the case, then obviously it's environmental, but in a different way. It's maybe not directly from an environmental extreme, but these people are killing the elephants because of the tusks. They're killing them because of their farmland. They sell the tusks. The farmland is valuable. The elephants trample. Elephants have to eat an enormous amount of green food every day, and they're running out of habitat. So if
they're raiding the farms and stuff,
and it's terrible. And if the only place we're going to see elephants is the zoo, if that's going to even be a possibility. No, they say there's 350,000 wild elephants on that continent, but it varies. Everything that I read varies, but this was the most significant number, and they want to try to stem that die off. Tony, what do you think? Do you have any thoughts on this one?
Did they were they discovered with tusks? I'm sorry to interrupt. I was just curious. Do we know?
You're not interrupting. Actually, I don't know, and that's one of the things we'll have to look at, because they didn't actually say poaching, did they? I don't think they said poaching.
No, they didn't.
So we don't know.
I got the feeling it could be like a virus that the elephants are having. Because it's in this really kind of like solidified, just very small, 1,000 square miles. And maybe they have like their own version of coronavirus. Who knows?
Oh, that could very well possibly be it.
No.
If it is climate related, that would just be another case example of how the biology is struggling to adapt to a change in climate as well. We have to remember that during these catastrophic instances, a lot of animals do die. I was,
He'll be back.
okay. Well, one of the things that happened just earlier this year, remembering in Australia, along with the bushfires, is that we had 1.5 to 2 billion animals burn up and die, perish. I mean, to think about that as a way to start the year in such catastrophic, really, I mean, there's never been a war that's ever costed humanity that many individuals. You can't really fathom the suffering that the planet is going through. So, if it is climate change related, and there's a lot of things to think about when we talk about climate change related death, right? Climate change has the ability to impact not only your external environment, but also your internal environment as well. And we've seen examples of, I'm forgetting the particular case that happened to a group of deer in Siberia, where the whole species had gone extinct because essentially a certain organelle in their digestive tracts had died off as a result of the changing climate. And that was something they could have not predicted or done anything to affect. That would be a silent killer among them, that would have infiltrated their population without knowledge. And that would have been an external factor impacting an internal factor. And we're certainly going to see that. The heart back on with our connecting, the changes in the environment to impacts on water supply. When the ground is tossing and turning, these things are happening. Water supplies are being damaged. As Nick alluded to earlier, different changes in how water is distributed can change the way the biology interacts with it, and they could have created a poison toxin. We've seen off the coast of Florida, we're having a lot of red algae blooms that have been poisoning that state's coastal waters. By the way, Florida's been hit with a number of biblical concerns. Just
Can I ask you something? In Florida, I know the segue's off, but it's also the sugar production, right? The runoff from the sugar production is what happens too. Does anybody know about that process a little bit? Isn't it? It's like it builds the algae and the fungus, but it's sugar runoff. That's worse. That's bad. And people don't realize it. It's only sugar. Yeah, okay. Rot your teeth and wreck your gut and completely wrecks your body. Of course it's going to do something like that.
Yeah, I think it's like sugar and nitrogen, like all the nitrogen from the farming. It's just a combination of those things. It flows into the Lake Okeechobee, and it just absolutely just pollutes it some years with tons and tons of algae, and it's gross. And yeah, I mean it's in other areas of the country have those problems too with algae blooms. And actually the floods last year, you had, and also a couple years earlier with Hurricane Harvey, you had tons and tons of this and waste go into the Gulf of Mexico and produce tons of algae blooms and dead zones. It's bad. This is kind of the part of the issue of the future with climate change. You're going to get all this environmental damage caused by damage to industry. Industry gets destroyed, releases all the toxins that were contained by the infrastructure that's now been destroyed, goes out into the oceans, goes into the lakes, and just pollutes them and starts killing things.
Yeah, well, that's
pleasant.
pleasant, but it does segue us into the article and the information about our illustrious President Schmuck, Donald Trump. And I saw him on television. I couldn't even watch this today. And I tried. I really tried without regurgitating the scientific method of puke. He actually is he's rolled back so much, and I've done pieces on this before, and he wants to speed up big projects. And it's just a little article. I'm not going to play him. I'm just going to tell you that he is rolling back stuff from the Nixon era when the EPA started. He says, this administration, in their infinite greeddom, is they're rolling back everything to jumpstart these infrastructure projects. Somebody's got to mute themselves. Uh, but they don't care. So fouling up the environment, they're not going to have the public feedback. So anything that's a project, a capital project, we had pipelines, you go to the public meeting. There's comment periods in the Federal Register for the public to comment about these projects before they're done. That's going away, guys. There won't be any hearings. There won't be anything. They're just going to steamroll projects all over the United States. Goodbye. And it's going to look like, I remember as a kid going up and down the FDR Drive from New York City and up, and how the Hudson River was disgusting, and the factories spewed smoke and grit, and it's going back. It is going back, and I am disgusted. And he's like, together we're reclaiming America's proud heritage as a nation of builders that can get things done. He's a complete moron. I will say one thing. He's talking about light bulbs and shower heads, and he says that they're, basically counterproductive. How can they be counterproductive? They want jobs or they don't want jobs. Is that manufacturing or is that not manufacturing? It is anti-science. This is basically what it is. Anti-science. Anybody else care to comment before I just go off on a tangent?
Well, I can say something. I mean,
sure can.
I'm pretty convinced that Trump and the wealthiest among us are they're so like engrossed in their own desire to get rich that they're literally suicidal. I mean, yeah. They don't see themselves as suicidal. They just see everyone else going to the guillotine, going to the flames, and they don't see themselves going to the flames themselves. It's basically, you see it everywhere. You see it with the coronavirus. We got a governor in Georgia that's suing Atlanta's mayor for the city of Atlanta for having a mask mandate. It's like everything is suicidal behavior, where all they care about is getting everything done as cheaply as possible to make more money, getting workers back to work to make more money, the heck with their health, the heck with their safety, getting consumers to go to Disney World, the heck with their safety. I look at people going to Disney World in the middle of a coronavirus, like mega pandemic gone nuclear. It's like sharks at a buffet. It's a coronavirus buffet. The coronavirus just has all these people to pick off. Well, it sounds funny, but that's what's happening,
real quick. And then we're, and I'm not interrupting. I just have to read this because it's just part of what we're doing. We are now living in the parallel universe where wrong is right, truth is a lie, facts are fiction, logic is illogical, stupid is smart, and scientific evidence is no longer proof. Welcome. Anybody care to comment further?
Well, we really have entered that kind of 1984 George Orwellian, and then the Brave New World, Aldous Huxley. It's just, we really have taken that fork and we're seeing it manifest now. And here we are. We've decided to become an insane species. This is the behavior of an insane, suicidal species. That's what we're looking. That's crazy people, right? That's crazy. So, Trump is the manifestation of all of this, and he has taken away the last lines of defense for frontline communities, and he continues to demonstrate a total disregard for our environment and for those demanding racial and environmental justice. This was said by Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer. God bless his soul. I love Chuck Schumer so much. You know, this is the behavior. Well, I think he's been good. Okay, but yeah, he's probably a little closer to home for you. But, this is the behavior and the mental manifestations of an insane suicidal species. Gone nuts.
And you see that the politics in America are, I think, the most deranged in their history. But we're in the middle of a pandemic right now, and neither of our politicians have moved toward a type of universal healthcare system. We're on the verge of entering the greatest homelessness era in our history just a few days from now. That's catastrophic. I mean, the Congress is on vacation right now. The talks that have leaked to the press are all about tax cuts for the super rich. This is a country that has one of the most brutal police forces in modern industrial civilization. So we're really talking about a situation where things are spilling over. There are already bread lines. There are already people living crisis to crisis, and to know that the climate is worsening at full speed, before our very eyes, on top of all of the social injustices that we already have going on, it really shows that our society is on the verge of a great cataclysm.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
I can tell you.
Well, I mean,
go ahead.
I was just gonna say we're talking about 1984, that famous, quote from the official slogans of the party, war is peace, freedom is slavery, ignorance is strength. That's like literally that's what I'm seeing right now. Like, especially, you could say chaos is peace. Like, we having all of this chaos with the pandemic, chaos with climate change, chaos with politics, and it's treated as normal. Like, I still could see, like, I am trying to like convince some of my friends that don't like Trump to understand that he could still win the election.
Yeah. No,
we've lost all of these people. We're gonna lose so many more people to this pandemic, for example. And he could still win. and I mean, we could talk about Biden and the pluses, if there are any, or the negatives of Biden till the cows come home, but Trump as he is, he could still win the election because he even with all of the chaos he creates, because it's seems to be part of the culture now of America. And ignorance being a strength now, ignorance about, I mean, everyone's attacking, a whole bunch of people are attacking, scientists and science and climate change and epidemiology. And climate scientists are getting on Twitter and telling epidemiologists, "Oh, I understand your pain," trying to convince people using factual information, and understand that the state of science changes when it came to understanding, say, the virus, like understanding the state of climate change. Our understanding of it 30 years ago was a lot different than it is now. It's the same thing with a pandemic that started in January. We understand it a lot better now than we did back then, but people say, oh, the scientists are wrong. The scientists don't know what they're talking about. The experts are nothing. This ignorance is seen as a strength. And I mean, it's kind of scary out there to watch America just kind of fall to pieces.
Well, that's right. We're witnessing the crumbling of a great power, and this is it. We're watching the fall of the United States. And once things get this much momentum, I mean, it's going to be rough. It's going to be the world is not going to be the same world that we grew up in. It's not going to look the same, and climate change is just going to get worse. So what's that going to look like?
Well, Tony, what's it going to look like? And then we're going to segue to you because you've got the bring up the rear article, which is a pretty big bang up. And Nicholas, thank you. I think I mean honestly, this has been a really good
Yeah.
conversation. You three have been kicking butt, and I'm always, as always, in awe of all of you. Uh, we have we do have the ending article, and then we're going to take questions um, from the peanut gallery out there, because I will read them. But Antonio, we're going to segue to you, to the COVID and the masks and the coronavirus and Fauci, and take it away. Boom, boom.
All right. So one of the things that I wanted to say, because it's going to be, I think, a repeat, if not theme, it's going to be a repeat situation where public health officials will have to make pronouncements to the public in order to implement public policy. And one of the mistakes I think that Dr. Fauci and his team made, and he probably made it under immense pressure, I'm almost sure, because he's dealing with an administration that is opposed and vicious and prejudiced towards science, and people who accept the use of science in our society. So I understand that, there's a lot of political reasons why Fauci has to maneuver the way he does, but there are still consequences of that. And one of the consequences of Dr. Fauci now admitting that he had downplayed the effectiveness of masks during the beginning of the pandemic as to stave off, brutal market forces eviscerating what was left of the PEE accessibility to our healthcare workers. So he decided to use his platform as the head expert of the infectious and contagious disease institute in the United States to basically tell people to not run out and get these masks. And what that did was, even though for good reason, it sparked a controversy where people who are adverse to any type of scientific warning, right? So, we see this in the United States all the time. We've seen the anti-evolutionists. We've seen the pro-cigarette people, the climate deniers. So there's always going to be some segment of society that's going to go against mainstream science. And what Dr. Fauci did was arm them by his original statements, and then it smashed his credibility later on. Even though reasonable people could see what Dr. Fauci did, he didn't lie per se, but he downplayed the effectiveness of the mask. And these type of blunders with the public are going to make wielding public policy more difficult in the future, where we most certainly will be dealing with rampant pandemic and epidemics in relation to climate change and pestilence, where we'll be dealing with episodic moments of civil distress due to climate-related impacts to infrastructure or extreme weather events. So to lose trust in public officials is really a very unwelcome development. And to see that, there is a world we can have comparisons, right? That there's places where effective policy has slowed the virus and where effective policy is not. And what's interesting about the coronavirus, I think, is that it gives us perspective in real time, the impact that science and policy and statesmancraft really can have on the quality of people's lives, right? So informed states that heed the warnings and understanding of science can implement effective policies that can cut the spread of infectious diseases. States that say there is no such thing as meaningful science, it doesn't matter, it doesn't impact our life, those states will have rampant and out of control cases. And that's exactly what's happening in the United States. And so a lot of ways I see, this is the same moment when Ronald Reagan ripped solar panels off the White House. This is the same type of behavior. And like coronavirus is rampaging through our society today, so too will climate change.
Yeah, I mean all you have to do is look at China. Granted, they screwed up early on, especially in Wuhan, Greater Wuhan, the politicians there. But you see China, you see New Zealand, you see say Germany, but then you look at Iran, Italy, Spain, United Kingdom, and then you look at currently U.S., Brazil, Russia, those areas where they haven't been taking the virus very seriously, and it's running rampant like crazy, and specifically in the U.S., you saw some of the early problems in New York, and then now across the South and the West. I mean, it's horrible to watch. You want politicians to take this seriously and understand the science. The science is not your enemy, but yet they don't, and it's just like watching a slow motion train wreck, and it's really sad. And that many of those same people in regions will probably face abrupt climate change with the same attitude and behavior as they are with coronavirus.
Antonio, we were earlier talking about Fauci, and I said, well, do you think that some of this, obviously undermining this whole thing from the beginning with masks, already creating the doubt, do you think he was at all covering for the administration because they did not have adequate supplies and completely ignored?
Like I said, I feel like Dr. Fauci was under extreme political pressure. It's apparent even in the conferences that you had a maniac, President of the United States, trying to bully the top doctor in infectious disease in national television. And so you had a situation where Fauci was obviously abundantly aware that we didn't have enough PPE at our hospitals to deal with this virus, and we didn't have a containment policy in regards to the virus, that it was going to spread. The earlier models had showed 1 to 2 million, anywhere between 500,000 and 2 million Americans dying from the virus, 150 million Americans being affected within the first year. So the first models were absolutely dire in the absence of a lockdown shutdown. But now what are we seeing? Dr. Fauci had revised his numbers back. He earlier said in March that we would expect, something like 100,000 to 200,000 cases. And he walked that back and said, well, 60 to 100,000, deaths. He said, we're going to have 100,000 to 200,000 deaths. And then he revised it down to 60 to 100,000 deaths. And look at where we are right now in August, near 140,000 deaths. I mean, we are clearly, if this is going to be something that's going to be with American society for the next 2 years,
that's what I said to Doug today.
We are looking at, I think, easy at 500,000 to 1 million deaths.
No.
Yeah, I agree. I think we're in the worst case, sort of the worst case or quasi worst case scenario for the coronavirus. I keep reminding people like even if the infection fatality ratio, which includes people that are asymptomatic running around not even getting sick, is really low, that fatality is really low, it's still you're talking about big numbers when you get a quarter of the population or half the population or 60, 70, 80% of the population infected. That's 500,000 people. That's a million people. It's like people are there's kind of a denial building up. I've noticed, especially with conservatives when it comes to the deaths, the deaths aren't that bad right now. Like, oh, we're losing 900 people a day the past couple of days. That seems pretty bad to me. No, it's not 2,000 a day like it was in New York, at
Right.
one point in April or whatever. But you're losing 900 additional people, 1,000 additional people a day. That's adding up every single day, and eventually you're going to get to this 500,000 or higher death toll. I mean, right now the CDC is predicting by August 1st we'll have between 140,000, 160,000 deaths just by August 1st, and I mean we're crossed 140 now, I believe, or getting close. So I mean, it's just I don't. It's just really sad to watch people see a terrible situation instead of do what needs to be done to deal with the situation. They just crawl into their holes or put their heads in the sand and are just like, oh, it's not that bad. It's not happening. And I mean, it's just normal human response, I guess, denial and bargaining. But I mean, it's what we see with climate change. It's what we see with a whole bunch of problems we face as a world. You get overwhelmed and then you just don't know what to do. And even measures that you could do that could stave it off, or they could either stave it off, slow it down, make it not as horrible, people won't do because they're too busy being in denial. I mean, there's plenty of things we could do related to climate change that can make the suffering of climate change much less impactful on the poorest people, in particular. There's all sorts of things we could still do, even if we can't stop climate change or reverse climate change, but nobody does them. So,
what's our climate change, Greta? I think there was an article in Common Dreams, and she's bringing up the movement again. I think it was 100,000 people signed on, and this is not getting any media attention. It should be. And all of the Sunrise Movement, they've lost a little bit of the focus because of coronavirus. It is a mess. And
I guess I shouldn't say no, but I guess I shouldn't say not. There's no one doing it. There's a lot of people, but they get drowned out.
Yeah.
They get ignored. Yeah.
Yeah. Tony, how you doing? I'm looking at you up there on the screen. I'm like, how you doing up there, Tony? Did you
I'm doing okay.
Finish up and then we go for questions?
Yeah, I didn't really have much more to say on to that issue other than, it is important that everyone do wear masks when you're out in public to lessen the spread. It doesn't look like the United States will get its act together, and we will see no change, unfortunately, in policy at least until the Biden administration comes to power, if elected, which wouldn't be until January of 2021. So,
and then we need to go
unfortunately, that means that. So people hang in there. I know families. Some of my friends have lost grandparents to this already. So the death is in the air, and more people are losing families. And we all really should take care to be mindful of one another, considerate of one another.
That's a beautiful.
Yeah, I got a friend that lost an aunt, another friend that lost a father in Texas recently. Yeah, and I mean, I know people that were suspected cases that couldn't get tested at the time here in Nebraska. So, I mean, yeah, it's all over the place. So just, wear a mask, socially distance, don't go out and have Corona parties. I mean, I've heard some really weird stuff.
Don't be a super spreader.
Well,
Yeah, don't be a super spreader, and you could be asymptomatic, so you could be a super spreader and not even know it. So that's why you be careful.
all right. I'm looking for some questions, and we have how many deaths? Okay, let's see. How many deaths per day do we need to stabilize the population total? Around 230,000 a day. It's a predicament. That's a wild. That's a
Oh man.
different way to think of this. You mean
Yeah.
Rich is like looking at this as not that it's well, could be on purpose. I'm saying 230,000 a day, is that going to affect the birth rate statistically? I guess he's looking at this as a
I don't
Well,
know.
yeah, of course
completely
it would,
Yeah.
because
non-human.
if it ever got into plague-like proportions, so remember back in the 1500s and a little bit into I think the late 1400s and through the 1500s and a little bit into the 1600s, plague, the Black Death, was a really big deal in Europe, and it wiped out a significant portion of the population, and it was an absolute horror. And because it wiped out so much of the population, the curve of the population actually was quite flat for a long time. It really set Europe back a lot from the population trajectory that it had been on.
And the reason why that happens after pandemic wipeouts like that is actually a very similar effect that happens to industrialized economies when they start going through stage 4, peak industrialism and education. But what happens when you see, and what we saw in Europe after the Black Death, is that unemployment essentially disappears. Everybody has to go back to work in overtime, essentially, to maintain the society, because the disease destroys the society or kills indiscriminately. Well, the plague did. So young people like were dying from this. And so you had so much of a loss of society that when the virus did finally wane, when people did return back to work, there was plenty of work to do, but there was more than plenty of work to do. And anytime that you see that, you see a reduction in services, you see a reduction in food, the standard of life declines as well. So that's why you also see declining in fertility, a decline in, procreation in general. So I don't think we'll get anything like that from the coronavirus. I think the biggest impact coronavirus will have, particularly now in the United States, is the lifespan impacts. That is to say that the people who are running around not realizing that coronavirus is not just a virus that impacts you, a disease that impacts you today, it's a disease that can impact you well and on into the future. Early studies have shown that the disease has an ability to impact brain function, heart function, kidney, liver, and digestive. So, a lot of people who feel like they're asymptomatic, it's likely that the virus, the COVID-19, has attacked some organ in your body, and because you're not familiar with the sort of symptoms that are related with those organ distress, you're just simply unfamiliar with the symptoms and you don't think that you have them because you're expecting flu-like symptoms. Or the symptoms may be so minor, people are dying of blood clots and heart attacks, you don't really have symptoms of those things. You just undergo the woes of those type of medical upheavals. So
yeah, I saw that there was a 20-something in Texas. I saw a news story. He thought he was having a heart attack and he was having blood clots, and they tested him and he had COVID-19. He was getting blood clots induced by the viral infection in his blood. So I mean, yeah, I mean it's a weird virus. I mean, it could be like in the acute nature, it's very different from, say, the Black Death or even the influenza pandemic of 1918, 1919, in that it's not killing younger people in great numbers. I believe the 1918, 1919 pandemic had a double peak where it would kill a lot of people in their 20s and 30s, and then kill a lot of people in that were older age, like 60, 70, 80 years old. Here, it's heavily favoring killing people that are, above the age of 55, 65 years
Oh,
old.
I know.
But
That's why I say
but
goodbye
not so
every
much people in their 20s and
single spring.
30s, but they may have to deal with these infections and illnesses that come after the acute infection, by where they may not get much, or maybe they do, but they recover, and that they have to deal with blood clot issues and have to deal with, as Tony said, brain issues and all of these other issues down the line that bother them for the rest of their lives.
Yeah.
So I mean, that's really the messaging I think that needs to really go out to people in their 20s and 30s that think they're immune. They might be immune to an acute infection. They may get infected and they may not even know it, but it may hamper them down the line. And that's really hard to get through to people, because people are really short term. That's why that's another issue we have with climate change. People are very short term in their thinking. And that's the same thing with the coronavirus. People are very short term, unless you are 20 or 30 something that happens to have diabetes, or you happen to have immune problems, some comorbidity. You're not thinking very much outside of the short term, like, oh, I'm going to get it and it'll be like a flu and I'll be fine.
Yeah.
You may not be fine 10 years from now.
Wow, everything's going to affect. Everything is. It's a big fat feedback loop. Feedback loop of life. My pearls of wisdom. Well, it's a difficult situation here. I can't even add any more. And Nicholas, you've done a really good job articulating quite a bit here. All of you have. I'm actually, I feel like we could just go all night long. We've been an hour and 22, and we used to just go an hour. Now we're going an hour and a half, it seems. But I think we have a question that now this is taking us to a completely different realm. Groot, LA. Hi, Groot. Since the Great Lakes water is getting so warm, like 85 degrees, are the Finger Lakes next? So is this migrating in my state? Are we starting to now sweat the lakes? Because it's a good question.
Actually, that's interesting because, someone had asked, and I'm forgetting, I think it was Gregory Mullen, asked about that, but I may be incorrect. And I asked Nick if he'd want to do a show sometime on that specific issue, the Great Lakes region warming so much and the dynamic impact that's going to have on the microclimate there in the local region. I unfortunately don't know much about the impacts it's going to have, so I'll let someone else say.
I'd have to research a little bit more, because that's a lot of that. I can think of meteorological issues that could have, but like the biological stuff, that'd be really something to research and to learn more about, because that's a big thing. I'm sure everything from microorganisms and algae blooms and other issues for fish that need relatively cool water to survive. They dealing with very hot temperatures in the water. They may not survive. I know that's an issue with salmon, say in Alaska, where they're getting hotter temperatures up there. The rivers get too warm and the fish just die. So, that's going to be an issue for the Great Lakes as well.
And I know that the Great Lakes, in terms of microplastics, are of the most polluted bodies of water on the planet. So imagining, kind of imagining like what Jennifer was painting, in our imaginations earlier with, a toxic, sludgy, disformed, warped Arctic land. I'm just imagining a kind of mucky, plasticky, warm soup of the Great Lakes in the future. I mean, it really is sad, the havoc that we're wrecking on our planet.
Yep, it sure is. Jen, you want to
So
bring
on
up
that
the
note,
well, I was going to ask Jen to bring up the rear on that one because really it does. I mean, the question kind of does segue to what's happening in the Great Lakes, other lake systems like up north, perhaps.
Well, I mean, everything is becoming abnormal, and the warmth is spreading down, it's spreading up, where it's getting hot here, and that's also spreading up. But the Arctic is getting hotter I heard the other day, like up to 4 times faster than the rest of the Earth, and that's just gonna throw this whole Earth into chaos. So the way I see it, guys, smoke them if you've got them, because
All right, Himbo.
because it's so big and it's happening and there's so much momentum in it that enjoy this moment. We're kind of living in that last sort of orange cast sunset, and so we should just kind of enjoy the life that we have right now, because I don't see it getting very much better.
Well, I was out yesterday, and who the hell knows? I was socially distant, but who knows? You don't know. And I say that every time. I could be saying sayonara, guys, but still pulling through, and we still got our state of the planet and climate changes and the rising tide and Jennifer and Sandy Sunday Night Live. Press the like. Don't forget, I will put links in for Nick's Patreon, and Antonio, anything you want to add, links or whatever, just give them to me. Jennifer, same thing. And I want to thank everybody for coming. We're about at the hour and 27-minute mark, so thank you, Rich, Diana, and Jennifer, Elizabeth, and Microsoft Word technical support, and Laura Sartori, and everyone, Gazer, and I'm a Sweet Leaf. Thank you, Mike Olinger, Ben. George is here, Jennifer. He's up late.
Oh, hi, George.
Yeah, he's up late. Gene, thank you, Gene and Kim. And we had a really good group. A boy and his shopping cart. That's a good one. Boy and his shopping cart. So, Rich, Diana, thank you, Warren. What are we going to say? We have one more comment. WAS. Boy, are we a depressing group. No, we're telling the goddamn truth. And that's it. You come here for a sobering night. You're not coming here for sugar-coated bullshit. That's the way it goes. And on that note, peace out, guys. Jennifer, I love you. I love you all.
I love you too.
Peace and goodwill.
Peace and goodwill.
Bye, you guys.
Woohoo.
Bye.